On behalf of the Department of Communication of Ateneo de Manila University, we welcome you to Patok na Patok, a conference where we take seriously the things we usually say are just for fun. Whether iba ba konti. Because let's be honest, what is Patok is not just entertainment. It's culture, power, identity, and all those big academic terms we use that we like to throw at each other. Ako po si Dr. Seb Sarmenta. I will be your host for this early morning session. It's my honor to introduce our Dean of the School of Humanities to formally open our conference, Dr. Patricia Lambino.
Good morning, everyone. I'm your friendly neighbor from the School of Humanities, and I welcome you all on behalf of Dr. Sarina Saloma Akpedonu, the Dean of the Dr. Rosita G. Leong School of Social Sciences. In her place, I would like to thank the plenary speakers from USC Annenberg, Drs. Rob Kozinets and Henry Jenkins, from the University of the Philippines, Dr. Patrick Campos, and of course, all the presenters and participants here today. I would like to congratulate and thank the Department of Communication headed by Dr. Christine Cox for organizing this conference in partnership with ACF, Eugenio Lopez, PCS, IPC. In your field of communication, and I'm definitely out of my depth here, and in the communication department here at Ateneo, there is a great mix of the arts, humanities, and social sciences. And I see the focus on creative production, theory and research, some of which are more social sciences leaning and some more arts and humanities leaning, drawing from cultural studies and the like. In the program, that excellent blend is brought to bear on the question of the popular. Now on that, there is this song from the hit musical Wicked. You know the song? Where Galinda sings, "I'll teach you the proper ploys when you talk to boys." You know it? Okay. And further down, it's not about aptitude, it's the way you're viewed. So it's very shrewd to be very, very popular like me. And she may be onto something there. Popularity equals power and influence. And that power is held in her mind by a few like her and mediated by people of her sort. Fortunately, there are scholars like yourselves who are able to scrutinize that further and hopefully unpack the fuller story of the popular for the rest of us. Okay? And so it is my hope that this two-day conference is filled with insight, meaningful connections, and fruitful conversation that will shed light on our realities that will serve not just the popular, but the common good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lambino. I thought the next line would be cue music. She would perform. I would not have been surprised. Thank you very much, Dr. Lambino. Now, to give us a deeper sense of what this conference is all about, and if you have any questions that I'm sure she can answer, please welcome the Chair of the Department of Communication, Dr. Christine Ann Cox.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Patok Patok. Thank you so much for being here. Let me start with a very serious research-based question. How many times have you checked your phone today? Right? So be honest, safe space ito. We're all complicit here. But, think about it. Before breakfast, before class, before even saying good morning, we scroll, right? We're guilty of that. We like, we share, we decide very quickly what's patok, what's worth watching, what's worth reacting to or sending in the GC. But here's the thing. We're very good at knowing what is patok, but not always why it is patok and what its effects are, not just as individuals, but as a society. So when something becomes popular in the Philippines, whether it's Beanie taking over your Facebook feed or SB19 fans or budots showing up in places it shouldn't be, it doesn't just stay online. Okay, nasa TikTok siya, it's in the news, pinag-uusapan. And when that happens, it starts to shape how we think, what we believe, what we value, even how we present ourselves. So Patok, it's not just entertaining, right? It's influential, and that's exactly why we're here. You might have noticed our conference icon, over there, right? So it's a colorful splash. Parang abstract lang siya at first, but actually, what Patok, it captures what Patok looks like, a splash, It's sudden, it's unpredictable, it's messy, it's impossible to ignore. Different colors colliding, like different voices, platforms, fandoms, communities. You see what I did there? So some splashes, they fade, some leave a mark, some mix, and some turns into something entirely new. And just like that icon, popular culture, it doesn't move in straight lines, right? So it spreads, overlaps, transforms everything it touches. Okay. So just a quick trivia about this conference. This is actually a sequel, right? For those who don't know, the first Patok conference happened in 2016 with Sir Dr. Angela Renzana. Pero ibang-iba pa yung internet noon, right? 2016, where were you? I think TikTok, hindi pa siya ganun kalaki. At least not the TikTok we know of as today. Diba? Wala pang For You page na mas kilala pa kaysa sa sarili mo. Medyo tahimik pa ang mga GC, I think, right? But almost a decade later, or exactly a decade later, we're back. And like any good sequel, we're bigger, more complex, and higher body count, I hope, of attendees. Over the next 2 days, we'll be talking about fandoms, identities, platforms, storytelling, journalism, activism, and more. Different panels, different perspectives, but all asking how does what becomes Patok shape the way we live today? And to help us unpack that, we have 3 incredible keynote speakers. Dr. Robert Kozinets, who will help us understand digital communities, influencers, and how online culture actually operates behind the scenes. We have Henry Jenkins tomorrow, who reminds us that audiences are not just passive. We participate, we remix, we make culture. And also tomorrow, Sir Patrick Campos from UPFI, who brings us back to the Philippine context, asking how our media and cinema reflect who we are and how we tell our stories. So we also ask, who decides what becomes Patok? Is it the algorithm? Is it the audience? Is it the creators? Or is it all of us? And when something becomes popular, who benefits? Who gets left behind? So over the next 2 days, I hope this becomes more than just listening. This is a pop culture conference, and we are, as my friend Noel Murad said, in the Araneo. So I think I can get away with being Baroque. Let's makilahok sa Patok. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cox, for setting the tone for our conference. Now it's time for our keynote speaker. He is someone whose work many of us have already encountered, whether in research, classrooms, or even in how we understand online culture itself. He is an internationally recognized expert in social media and branding, renowned for inventing lithography and an early pioneer in fandom and influencer marketing research. He has also served as a visiting professor globally with posts at the University of Sydney and Rio de Janeiro, the University of Auckland, Cattolica University in Milan, Sorbonne Business School in Paris, and many others. He has worked with high-profile brands, including Heinz, Ford, TD Bank, Sony, Vitamin Water, and L'Oreal, providing strategic research and consulting. He is also an associate editor for the Journal of Marketing and Journal of Interactive Marketing. He has published a lot of papers, by latest count, 150 or more, 10 books, and he has supervised numerous successful master's level and PhD students at USC and around the world, and is currently featuring some of their scholarship in the Frames of Fandom book series he is co-authoring with USC Annenberg colleague Henry Jenkins. The title of this lecture is Influencer Fandom Beyond Parasociality in a Social Media Age. Please welcome Dr. Robert Kozinets.
Okay, here we go. We have a little time delay between Los Angeles and the Philippines, apparently. Okay, here we are. So the title of the talk is about influencer fandom, and it takes a look, as you're going to see, at this term parasociality in relation to the environment. Did my slides change yet? Do you see the 2 books on the screen? Yes? No? I'm going to pull up the chat window so I can see here.
Yes, we can see the two books on the screen.
Thank you very much, Eugenio. Okay, good.
I have a new name.
All right. So this talk is really a combination of two research interests that I've had pretty much from very early in my career. One is an interest in the world of influencers and creators and social media. And as you're going to see, my definition of influencers might be a little bit different from the definition of influencers that you have, as well as the work that I've been doing pretty much from the beginning of my career, and I've really been continuing intensely with your other keynote speaker from tomorrow, Henry Jenkins, on fandom and thinking about the different ways of thinking about fandom and where fandom actually exists and how it plays a role in our lives. So this is a study that basically starts to ask whether we can find fans and fandom in the same way that we find fans and fandom in relation to other media celebrities. So musicians have fandoms, sports figures have fandoms, franchises like Harry Potter and Star Wars have fandoms. Does it make sense to say that influencers have fans in the same way that these other media franchises or fan objects have? And if they do, obviously it's a little bit of a leading question because we kind of did some field work first to see what was going on out there. If they do have fans, well, what is the significance of that? What does that tell us as fan scholars, as people who are interested in popular culture and where media culture and, in fact, social media culture are taking us today? So that's really the setup, is that just is sort of a general question. Now, I will start you guys off with a kind of a fundamental framework or definition of what do we mean by fandom. So, fandoms are more than just someone having a relationship to something that they love, like a form of music or a sports team or a musician. We have relationships with all these different kinds of fandoms on a one-on-one basis, or maybe with a few friends or family members. And the sports management literature has for a long time called this particular kind of relationship, the one you see with the top circle and the circle on the right between the person and the fan object, they call this fanship. So a fanship kind of exists when a person has a passionate relationship to some object of mass culture that, if enough people have these kinds of relationships, then it becomes popular culture. This is the difference between mass culture and popular culture, is that the people have embraced this object, whether that object, again, can be, a K-pop band or a motion picture or genre of music. It could even be a game and so on. Where that moves into fandom is when we add the social element, when there is a community that they join in, where there are other people involved, and where the connection between people is really based on an affiliation related to that fan object. So a fandom is a fanship plus that level of sociality, right? That both people who are passionately engaged with a fan object start to become affiliated with one another through communication, through sharing of creative works. Now, you can start to see that it does not just happen in person anymore. That once we got the means of communicating, now that's not just the internet, but going way back in time to fanzines and to fan publications, the fan fiction that Henry studied in the 1980s. All of this is a way of connecting and communicating and bringing others together to share their individual fanship and create something new called fandom. But obviously, this accelerated a lot when we had digital communications. So once you had the internet, once you have various TikTok channels and Reddit subreddits, you have many different ways that people can find each other who have similar passions and passionate engagements with fan objects and build those kinds of relationships with one another. So that's kind of the starting framework, is this idea of fandom as this kind of a social relationship that has an element of the sociality to it. So, we can see with Taylor Swift fandom, the sharing of memes, the creating of fan art, all of these sorts of things are not just about the person relating to the object of their fandom, It's also about them relating to other people through their fandom and having a relationship with others that consists of a significant amount of the communication and the enthusiasm and the attachment relating to the fan object itself. So, this has been something that has been very interesting to marketers. My native field is marketing and consumer research. In marketing and consumer research, we've done quite a bit of research that shows that fandom drives the ability to retain customers, to keep them over time. It drives people advocating or evangelizing for your product. It also drives the kind of engagement that algorithms like to see that rise things up through different social media platforms and give them increased visibility. Because of these things, this importance of the science of connection, marketers need to understand what goes on with these fandoms and these fan objects. So if we look at the links between influencers and their supposed followers, this is supposed to be a predictor of commercial potential. It's not just about the number of followers themselves. It's about the strength. And I would argue it's also about the type of connection and the connections that people make between one another, not just between themselves and the influencer, but between themselves and other people who are also following or united by or linked to or passionately engaged with that particular influencer or set of influencers. So now I'm going to kind of back up to a little bit of the theoretical frame. So I should mention, this is research that I'm conducting with my colleague in Milan, Italy, Rosella Gampetti. And we've been looking at how influencers have been written about, how fandoms have been written about. And we started this project about a year and a half ago, looking at different kinds of fandoms that had grown up around influencers that we had noticed in our other research, including the research that for the textbook that I showed you in the first slide. And one of the things that we've really noticed from the very beginning is that across media studies, across marketing, across consumer research, people were using this concept of parasocial interaction very often when they talked about influencers. So the notion of parasocial interaction, it'll probably be familiar to all of you. And certainly if you've written about influencers or about fandom and you've used an AI tool like GPT or Gemini or Claude, it very quickly reverts to talking about parasocial interaction. I think that's because so much has been written connecting influencers and academic research and parasocial interaction. The idea of parasocial interaction goes back to 1956, so 70 years ago. And the basic idea that Horton and Wall had is that people have these one-sided relationships with figures that they see on the media. The audience has the newscaster or the cowboy in this picture or whatever in their living room on a regular basis and feels like they know them. They feel connected to them. However, the performer is completely distanced from their audience. So it seems like a social interaction for the audience, but for the individual who's the broadcaster, for the producer, there's really no relationship with the audience at all. At least that's in the theory, right? Or it's something very, very distant. So this is a theory that came from the age of broadcast television. It was largely about media studies looking at how this illusion of there being an actual relationship was created through things like, close-ups and a direct address, looking into the camera and speaking directly to the camera, making eye contact through the screen, and so on. So, the idea was that this was something that was essential to the way that this medium worked, was creating these social relationships that weren't really social, but that they had the advantages for the media companies and for the producers of creating these bonds, creating this loyalty, and that this became something that was important. So all of these kind of assumptions got wrapped in when people started to talk about influencers, right? So the problem was, I think, that this wasn't necessarily the same form of medium that parasocial interaction was intended to discuss, right? Social media allowed all kinds of participation that weren't allowed in the broadcast model. So media became, with the internet, a lot less centralized. It became a lot more participatory. It became multi-directional, and there were ways for people to communicate. I think personally that even the old model ignored things like fan mail and conventions and things that fans had been doing to create less distance between them and the celebrities and the figures involved in their fan objects than we had assumed before. But now there are so many different ways that communication can flower. So direct messages, people doing live stream chats and getting comments and replying to them in real time. Even likes and different comments and engagement. I mean, I teach an influencer class. I bring in several influencers a year. And the average influencer, when I ask them how much time they spend reading through comments from people and replying to them, is probably about 2.5 hours, 2 or 3 hours, they say, per day that they're spending reading through comments, the bigger influencers, and they're replying to them. And these days, fans expect a level of acknowledgement, whether it's fans going to a convention or whether it's followers who feel very close to an influencer online. So influencers are managing the responses, and that this becomes kind of part of the bargain or part of the deal. And that's kind of where some of the research lately has led. So Rebecca Martin, my colleague in marketing, has written about influencers and said that there's kind of this implicit emotional contract. Now, Rebecca also writes about the influencer relationship as one that is typified by parasocial interaction. But around that, she's sort of wrapped in this idea that there's a contract between the two, that influencers promise, the illusion of openness and the illusion of caring about their followers. And in return, the followers reward them with their loyalty and even with their defense, right? So in an age of people being canceled, when someone is threatened, when someone is accused of doing something wrong, fans will come to their defense as long as they feel that the influencer are keeping their part of the bargain of caring about them. So if they see something inauthentic, like sponsored content that is not labeled, or that they feel that the influencer is doing, too much commerce or selling too hard, they might turn against them and mobilize in a negative way. But influencers will perform friendship to maintain the pact. And then influencers really, that was kind of Rebecca and her colleagues' insight, was that influencers are constantly managing these expectations, which are all about emotional labor. So that they were not only posting content, they were also building relationships and maintaining them. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the site of the research that we chose to do. And this is actually, I think this is an ad for this year's VidCon. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about VidCon last year, which my co-author and I attended. But basically, VidCon is an event where you are promised contact with the influencers who you only see online. So this is a little bit of an ad that I received in my email talking about what you can see at VidCon this year. Seeing these different influencers, not just on stage, but across the entire floor, live podcast recordings you can sit in on, creator-led experiences you can actually step into. So you can see how they're breaching the digital physical divide, right? Games, courts, and moments you don't plan, you just end up with them. You end up in them. It's where everything you watch online becomes real. You can catch clips after. You won't feel what it was like to be there. More creators are on the way. The only question is whether you're going to be part of it. So you can see that the advertising for this, the promotion for it, is arguing that you will be participating, right? That this is participative, that this is real. So, as we kind of walked in, and this is kind of what you see when we walked into this center in Anaheim, is a lot of people, security guards, and a lot of these stands, and a lot of openness, and a lot of milling around, and a lot of kind of different things to do, but very much a sort of a physical manifestation of what it's like to to be an influencer world and a place where the influencers get to perform their emotional labor, their relationship building work. So you have smaller influencers, and I'll talk a little bit about some of them, and larger influencers all kind of together. So there are panels, and on the panels, people will be up on a stage and the audience will be sitting on chairs and they will be presenting, but there will be a lot of Q&A. So people will be able to ask them. But afterwards, the presenters stand around, just like you would see at most conventions, I think, and the fans stand there, they take pictures with them, they come up to them, they shake their hands, they ask questions, they have physical, ongoing kinds of relationships with them. There are numerous kinds of presentations and influencer-led panels going on different stages. This was a panel about by beauty influencers, and most of these influencers had, I would say, between 100,000 and 500,000 followers on Instagram, and that was, that's not a huge number. That's a micro influencer level, but a lot of the questions that they had and a lot of the discussion that they had was basically about being a real person, a regular person, and how you can build your portfolio to become an influencer. How can you build an audience? What do you need to do? And a lot of that advice ended up being about relationship building and about listening and about maintaining some kind of a dialogue with the people who are following you online. There were influencer celebrities like Dr. Sandra Lee, who lives not that far down the road from me, Dr. Pimple Popper. So she wasn't always Dr. Pimple Popper with her own. If you don't know her, she's a dermatologist, and she has built a following around showing the inner workings of taking care of people's skincare, among other things, popping people's pimples when they have them. And she has a TV show now that I think is in its third season. Here you can see it on Disney Plus channel. But it could be available on Hulu or a number of different channels. But her profile started from her YouTube channel, where she built up enough followers and enough attention that the official networks took notice and built a show around what she had to offer. So we can see how a number of things are already embodied at VidCon. These meet and greets, which I'm going to show you one in a moment, are basically places where the influencer can repeatedly build personal contact with the people who are visiting from different places, and do this over and over again to build a lot of one-on-one, or more often person and couple or person and family. The influencers who are involved in this seem genuine. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment, how they do that. But it is a performance, right? This is influencers managing authenticity, which we know is very important in the online space, but they're doing it in the physical space as well. They're adding in that personal element of one-on-one connection to the kinds of connection that people have already built with them online. So it's that passionate connection, that desire to see the other person do well, that's really so much behind the influencer economy, and I would say toward a lot of the fan economy. When you think about K-pop fans getting together to vote for their favorite artist, or to live stream intentionally to build something up in the ratings so that it has a higher rating at certain times, and doing this as a coordinated effort, or buying Taylor Swift's new released, remixed album. All of these kinds of things are the way that they sustain that economy, based on a relationship that they feel is real. And just like Rebecca and her stuff said, when expectations are not met, we can see a backlash. And this is the unsteady part of the fan economy that we're familiar with. We see it even more strongly with the influencer economy, which has a lot of, the threats of cancellation and so on. we call this, my co-author Ulrike Gretzel and I call this a passionate public, right? That fandom and influencers are one of the ways that publics are forming now. Publics, in the past had been thought of as united around a common interest. Like, for example, if someone was, building a giant factory in your neighborhood or by your kid's school, parents would unite or neighbors would unite, and they would form a public that would protest this. Well, now we see that actually groups are uniting around their shared enthusiasm as well. And that passion in the middle of this passion flower is something that unites people, whether they are fans and influencers, as I've mentioned, perhaps they are activists as well, or perhaps they are reviewers online. So that this is something that we've been writing about and thinking about that unites this kind of enthusiasm. So, in these different relationships, what happens is that authenticity is performed, relationships are enhanced, and that, we can see these examples in a lot of these kind of authentic moments that are shared online, like people crying, like a background of being someone's bedroom, things not being perfect, the film work being a little bit sloppy or messy. Fans seem to respond in social media in particular for imperfections. They respond to things that are not polished like professional media, for moments that seem like they're behind the scenes, like, Dramageddon that happened with Tati and James Charles and that whole battle there. People felt that had actually happened and that it was unscripted and that they really were angry at each other. And so they responded, millions of people responded to that. When we were sitting at VidCon and listening, we kept hearing fans thank creators for being real. I thank you so much. You really inspired me because you're so real. That rawness, that sense of not being polished, that sense of not necessarily thinking through what people do before they do it, that was something that was really rewarded. Now, I'm not going to play you this one, but this is, one of the people that we met with was Kelsey Davies. She does kind of a psychic horror show kind of thing where she goes into haunted houses, or she has a doll that connects with the spirit world. Kind of a little bit frightening. My students were a little scared when I talked about her, but where'd she go? I see it connected to one of her videos, but I am not going to show you that. Let me go back. Let me go back to here. Yes. And see if I can go forward. All right. That's her haunted doll. We're not going to go there, but this is a meet and greet. So I came up, Kelsey was there. Her doll was there. We chatted for a while. She was very kind. I asked her a number of questions. We told her that we were doing research on it. She had, nice answers, and we connected. Another one that we met was a virtual influencer who's here, Southern California based. His name is Tubby Nugget. He was wandering around. So he has these very cute, very wholesome cartoons, not scary at all, just very sweet, very kind of childlike. And he was wandering around as a big cartoon character. But then they also were selling little things. So this is Josh and Janine. They actually are now married, but they met. He was kind of creating these little cartoon to amuse Janine when they were still dating, and they were working at the same place. And that's my co-author, Dr. Gambetti, down there on her knees by Tubby Nugget. We had a chance to meet with them. We heard their story. We asked them some questions. They were, none of them were rushed. They were all, very friendly, very open, very nice. I mean, is it a performance? Yes. Did it feel like a performance? No. I mean, it felt very, very realistic, and and we liked them. Tubby Nugget was not the only food. There was also horchata soto, and as well as a number of them. So, I'm starting to draw all of this together then. There are a lot of different kinds of connections that people have with influencers. I think when we limit it only to the online connection, and to the broadcast connection, I think we miss a lot of the story. I've already mentioned how much time influencers spend behind the scenes, trying to understand their audience and to connect with them. But these offline meetups also generate a lot of evidence of people breaching this supposed parasocial boundary, right? That, there is a lot of, it even turns into a sense of competition or pride. If you go to VidCon and post, oh, I met you, I saw her, we met, I shook hands with Kelsey Davies, all that kind of works. And the conclusion that we sort of reached from this is that in the sociality that we saw at VidCon, there's really not much para about it. It is sociality. And I think that there are, different types of social interaction that we have not yet really begun to catalog and understand and classify. So Horton and Wohl in their day did a great job 70 years ago talking about a new form of social interaction in which people felt like they understood the people who were on their screen. The situation right now is an extremely different one. And we are seeing a lot of different kinds of social interaction that are cultivated digitally, that are characterized by a sense of intimacy that is driven by the media. But there are also real elements of reciprocity happening that are extended and reshaped by physical encounters. 3 minutes, got it. Thank you. So a number of features of this, a reciprocal relationship, the fact that the intimacy is mediated, that fans are co-producing meanings, and that there are these live events that are embodied, but that are manifesting these relationships. So if we go online, we can also see sort of some of these signals of fandom that we've seen before. So fan creativity, Henry's going to talk to you about, creativity and co-construction and co-creation tomorrow. We see fan art of different influencers. In the bottom left here, you may recognize Lil Michaela. She shows up in a lot of things. Fan art, fan music, memes, GIFs, digital stickers that people are creating. People are selling fan-related merch and doing cosplay. So they're selling fan-created merchandising based on influencers on things like Etsy and eBay. They're handling them with on cosplay and doing influencer-related, particularly virtual influencers in conventions and performing them. We're probably going to see more of that. So, I won't talk necessarily about this evolution specifically, but we can see that this idea of parasocial interaction being sort of superseded by Martin et al.'s Intimacy Pact. And we're starting to talk about this being something more sort of multidimensional, being a techno-social interaction. So I think that, when we focus on fandom and influencers and their intersection, we can get a wider view of the scope of, what's happening in fan studies. It reveals some of these electronic mediated platform-based relationships in new ways. And we start to see, hopefully, both fandom and influencer culture in novel ways that can complement our understanding of both. And with that, I will conclude and thank you guys for the opportunity to share some of our ideas with you.